Chapter 1 Welcomes and Farewells Building Community Even in Transition. My classroom community. Ms. Schwartz, I have a big surprise for you, a gleeful voice called out. With thick Coke bottle glasses magnifying his brown eyes, Ronaldo took pride in being the first student to line up each morning when the bell rang. I read for 2 hours last night, he told me, as he put his homework in the basket. Despite English being his second language, Ronaldo was reading a year above grade level. His dream was to be a scientist, and he was always ready to tell you a surprising fact about Venus or volcanoes. Then one fall day, Ronaldo's life changed forever. He arrived at school and told me matter-of-factly that he wouldn't be in my third grade class much longer. I was told that his father had been detained by the police. The family fought his deportation, but when the news came that their appeal had been denied, Ronaldo's parents made the difficult decision to leave the life they had built in Denver so that the family would not have to live divided between two countries. To Ronaldo, the idea of moving to Mexico brought mixed emotions. Of course, being reunited with his father was welcome, but doing so at the cost of leaving the only life he had ever known was intimidating. From the information I had, Ronaldo had been born in the United States and was therefore a U.S. citizen. Colorado was his home. He had attended our school since preschool and had formed tight friendships with his classmates. He was the darling of every teacher who had ever taught him. Before leaving for Mexico, Ronaldo made his last days at our school count. He never missed a single homework assignment, even though an official grade would never be recorded. As the days ticked down, he took it upon himself to come to school each morning with an additional assignment completed, a letter carefully handwritten on blue-lined paper. His first was for me. Dear Mrs. Schwartz, thank you for all you have done to teach me. Thank you for helping me learn. I will always remember you. Do not forget about me. Sincerely, Ronaldo. The next day, he brought a letter for the principal. His former teachers, the school secretaries, even the lunch ladies all received farewell notes from Ronaldo. He penned letters to each of his friends, thoughtfully thanking them for their friendship and imploring each to remember him. If my life had been uprooted, my father taken away, and I knew I would likely never see my friends or teachers again, my initial response certainly would have been a flood of anger and resentment. Likely, Ronaldo experienced these same feelings, but he also made a deliberate choice to display gratitude. Watching him approach such a trying situation with maturity beyond his years taught me a powerful lesson about grace under pressure. On his last day with our class, we took as many pictures as we could. Students presented their own letters to Ronaldo, recounting their memories, pledging their lasting friendship, and wishing him luck on his journey. There was some scuffling about who would sit next to him at his last lunch and who would get the privilege of playing with him during his final recess. The students signed pages of a book for him and presented him with a plastic shark's tooth necklace so he could be strong like a shark, which he showed off proudly for the rest of the day. As the bell rang on his final day with us, there were several students in tears due to their love for Ronaldo. An unspoken anxiety that a similar situation could arise for other families hung in the air. Don't forget me, Ronaldo implored me more than once before he left. He need not have worried. Ronaldo is the type of student that will forever be etched in a teacher's memory. If anything, I hope he remembers me. Such a child brimming with potential and committed to learning could certainly achieve great things. I hope that wherever Ronaldo is, he is learning and happy. America's mobile students. Like me, all teachers have seen students come and go from our classroom communities. When we look at these arrivals and departures nationally, they begin to tell a story of how common student mobility is in today's classrooms. We can also begin to understand the causes of student mobility and the implications these movements have on a student's education. Student mobility is a term educators use to describe the phenomenon of students changing schools for any reason other than grade promotion. The widely cited and still continuing early childhood longitudinal study has followed a representative example of kindergarten students since 1998 and found that by the time this cohort entered fifth grade, 61% of students had made at least one school change. Another wide-reaching analysis of student mobility led by Dr. Russell W. Rumberger at the University of California, Santa Barbara, found that 16% of fourth grade students had moved schools more than twice in the last 2 years.
We now know that nearly all students will change schools before entering high school. A 2010 report by the Government Accountability Office, or GAO, found significant differences between the 70% of students who are less mobile, who changed schools 2 times or less before entering high school, and the 13% of students who were more mobile, who had changed schools 4 or more times. Researchers found that students who changed schools 4 or more times were disproportionately poor, African American, and from families that did not own their home or have a father present in their household. We also know that student mobility does not simply affect individual students, it affects school communities as a whole. In the United States, there are high mobility schools, termed this way because they serve a disproportionate share of those more mobile students. The GAO study found that 11.5% of all schools serve a student body that consists of more than 10% more mobile students. It was also found that schools with high rates of student mobility also tend to serve more students who live in poverty, qualify for special education services, and are learning English. They also have a higher absenteeism than schools with low mobility rates. Students who are more mobile tend to go to schools where resources are already stretched thin in order to serve students with greater needs. This means that student mobility cannot be fully understood when looked at as a singular issue. It is interwoven with complex socioeconomic issues. In reality, mobility is just one symptom of many different factors that affect our students. Why are students mobile? American students move for a multitude of reasons, but there are 2 basic categories each move can fit into: voluntary and involuntary. Voluntary moves obviously involve choice. A family might buy a new house and therefore change schools or consciously decide to make a school change. I changed elementary school every 2 years as a child simply because the population in my suburb was growing so quickly that the new schools were constantly being built to meet the demand. The difference between a voluntary move and an involuntary move matters because, as Rumberger explains, quote, voluntary moves are often planned in advance. They often take place between school years to minimize the disruption to students' educational lives. In contrast, involuntary moves often occur during the school year and hence can be more disruptive to the student's educational experience, end quote. In my classroom, families have reported to me that they chose to enroll or unenroll their children in my school for a variety of voluntary reasons. One father told me the last school had assigned an overwhelming amount of homework. Other parents have pointed to a perception of disrespect from teachers at the former school. Another family simply wanted their elementary-age children to attend school near their middle school-age child. One of my students, Licia, left our school because her older brother was accepted to a nearby art school and she was able to attend as well. Even though Licia knew in advance that she would be changing schools, it was a source of worry for her. She would tell me, quote, "I know it's for my family, but I don't want to leave my best friends. I like it here." Involuntary causes of student mobility vary as well. Sometimes these moves can be the result of a family change, such as a death or divorce. Economic factors play a role as well. Many families move when there has been a job loss or the cost of living has increased. Housing instability can play a major role in some communities. When I was a student teaching, my colleagues who had taught at the school for a number of years noticed a trend also noted by the Government Accountability Office. It seemed some students were changing schools on a cycle. We realized that the apartments near the school ran a 1-month free special on rent. Families would pay the first month's rent, get the second month's rent free, not be able to pay the third month, and then be evicted. A teacher I work with used to witness these evictions firsthand. I worked in the legal department of a property management company for 1 year. Most of my responsibilities entailed filing legal documents to evict tenants who had become delinquent on their rent. One day I worked with the local sheriff to evict a family. Hours passed as I watched them stack all their possessions into lopsided piles on the sidewalk. I remember clearly the expression on each one of their faces. The children looked scared and confused, but it was their mother's distraught face that is burned into my memory. The family had nowhere to go. That day affected me profoundly. I was no longer willing to contribute to the desperation I saw that day. The next day, I signed up for a teacher training program. That family is the reason I teach today. A student changing schools because of an eviction is an example of disruptive mobility. According to the National Center for Homeless Education, common causes of student mobility are poverty, migratory families, homelessness, immigration, and children being placed in foster care. And that's not all. An individual student might be dealing with several of these issues at the same time. When there is a sudden involuntary change in schools for a student, there are almost always challenging circumstances surrounding it that teachers need to be aware of. Ronaldo's story is just one of many. In 2013, the Center for Public Integrity shared records from the Applied Research Center demonstrating that between July 2010 and September 2012, more than 105,000 people claiming to have U.S. citizen children were deported. In my 4 years of teaching, there has always been at least one student in my classroom dealing with the deportation of a parent or a family member. Likewise, I have consistently taught students who struggle with homelessness. My students have told me they slept in their car the night before. They moved into an aunt's garage, or they were staying with another family until they could find a place of their own. Teachers may think all children who are homeless live in a shelter, but this is not true. Nearly 3/4 of homeless students live doubled up, meaning they stay with friends or extended family members. Teachers might not even be aware that a student in their classroom is struggling with homelessness. Sadly, the chances of having a student who is homeless in our classrooms rise every year. We now have more homeless students in our nation's schools than ever before. According to a U.S. Department of Education report, homelessness is on the rise with school-aged children. During the 2012 and 13 school year, there were 1,258,182 homeless students in American public schools. Of students who are homeless, 16% are children with disabilities and 14% have not yet acquired English. Each move our students make has a history attached to it. Our work is to listen to those stories. The more we know about the causes of mobility in our particular students, the better able we are to meet the needs and advocate for solutions that will provide support for our communities. Military-connected students. Students are almost never in control of when and where they move, but for more than 2 million American students, their living situation is dictated by a powerful force, the U.S. military. Students who are the official dependents of a military service member are known as military-connected students. The rates for mobility in military-connected students are triple that of their civilian peers. If a parent or caregiver is on active duty, typically there is a move every 2 to 3 years. The Department of Defense operates 172 schools for military-connected students, both within the United States and abroad. But 80% of military-connected students are educated in public schools by teachers who are often unaware of exactly who these students are. A great first step for teachers and school administrators is to identify these students with a simple conversation, or even as part of an initial questionnaire, so that they can better meet these students' specific needs. Sandra Temple, whose name has been changed in accordance with Department of Defense regulations, is a military family life counselor serving students attending several schools on and near an American military base. Her role is to support students and families struggling under the effects of extended and repeated deployments. She says, teachers should be prepared to help military-connected children and their families advocate for their educational needs. The truth is, 67% of children on active duty military families are under the age of 12. These are typically children with younger parents who no longer live in their home communities and are disconnected from extended family. Under these circumstances, advocating for the needs of their children can be difficult, especially when entering a new school. Temple also sees the impact of military mobility play itself out in students' behavior. Moving at the military's direction can be a major stressor for students. I often see students using coping strategies to lessen the pain of continuously leaving a community. Students begin to isolate themselves and detach from their friends and teachers, so it is easier to leave. A child might sabotage their friendships by engaging in bullying behavior or be reluctant to participate in group activities. Teachers can support students by acknowledging that what they are going through is tough. At one of the bases where I worked, several children found out which of their teachers had actually been raised as military kids themselves.
They then asked those teachers for their advice on moving. The document those teachers created became a resource for the children. It helps them so much to know that they are not alone in facing their challenges. However, when you realize that only about 1% of the total U.S. population is on active duty, you can understand why military children can feel so alone. The School Superintendents Association recommends that schools make necessary exceptions for military connected students when it comes to absences, registering for required classes, and transferring into the same grade level regardless of age limits or district policy. Transferring credits and meeting changing graduation requirements are additional challenges facing these students. It is particularly important to address the needs of military-connected students who qualify for special education services. For teachers, obtaining a copy of the most recent individualized education plan is essential to ensuring that each military-connected student's needs are met as soon as they enter the school. Teachers can help advocate for their students by pointing to the Interstate Compact on Educational Opportunity for Military Children, which has been signed by every state and helps address issues of enrollment, placement, attendance, eligibility, and graduation. Teachers can also assist a student who is leaving by compiling resources to be given to the family and then passed on to the child's next teacher. Included should be relevant information about the student's academic progress and the content and curriculum that has been covered. As Temple advises, military-connected students come from a unique and strong community. While they do need special consideration when entering or leaving your classrooms, there is also a wealth of experience and skills they can bring that can be leveraged into meaningful learning when it is valued by a teacher. Learning in the mobile student. Whether a student is connected to the military or not, the students in our classrooms who change schools often need additional attention. These moves have a sizable impact on their learning. While student mobility has been widely studied, its complicated nature makes it hard for researchers to make causal links between student mobility and academic outcomes. Each time a student transfers to a different school, the circumstances are unique. Often, there are typically multiple intertwined social, economic, and family issues. For example, if a child moved due to a divorce, it is difficult to determine to what degree his academics were affected by the change in his family dynamic and what role the move played itself. In Dr. Russell W. Rumberger's analysis of several studies regarding student mobility, researchers found that mobility does have an impact on academic achievement. The strength of a student's friendship network, the likelihood of experiencing depression, and even the likelihood of being arrested. He explains there is evidence that even one non-promotional school move reduced both elementary school achievement in reading and math and increased high school dropout rates, with the most pronounced effects for students who made 3 or more moves. A 1996 study that analyzed students in Chicago public schools, published by David Kerbow, found that students who were highly mobile could be as much as 4 months behind their schoolmates by 4th grade. By 6th grade, these highly mobile students could be as much as a full year behind academically. However, it is possible to limit the impact of changing schools. A different assessment of research, published in 2008, shows that having a school support from family and peers makes a big difference. More specific studies that examine the impact of the transition to middle school or high school indicate that support from peers and teachers positively influences the academic and social adjustment of adolescent students to a new environment. In other words, we teachers can make a huge difference in the lives of students who are mobile. We can support our students with strategies that help them to feel welcomed and cared about. Teacher tools. Number 1, start with a relationship. The first few days of any school year are about getting to know our students as people and setting firm expectations for what the coming year will bring. When a new student enters our classrooms in the middle of the year, they have missed out on all that community building work, and teachers need to make up for lost time by ensuring our first words to a new student count. The second a new student enters a classroom, our primary focus should be building a relationship. Being the new kid at a school is a high stress situation, no matter how old a student is. By simply saying something like, "I'm glad you are here," right away, you and the new student have a great start.
Letting a student know you are happy they are in your class can allow for a sigh of relief and make nervous shoulders drop 4 inches. Find several opportunities during the day to reinforce the idea that the new student is appreciated and welcomed. Be relentless. After introducing yourself and welcoming a new student to class, the next thing you should say is, "Sit here." Directing a student to their seat may seem obvious or even innocuous, but it is necessary. Classrooms often have a secret code of who sits where that can be difficult for new students to navigate. Saying, "Find a seat anywhere," will likely make a student feel nervous, out of place, even terrified to make a mistake. Finally, the last step is solidifying a new student's place in your classroom community is asking the student to contribute. I have found much success in my classroom by asking new students to help in some small way. Make sure, however, that you ask for help rather than command a new student to do a task. "Can you do me a favor? Would you mind pushing the chairs for me? I really need some help," will have a much different impact than "pushing those chairs." The task could be as simple as turning off the lights, putting away markers, or erasing the board. It's hard for even the most angst-ridden teenagers to refuse help to someone they just met when they are asked politely. Every student I have ever taught has found so much joy in being helpful. After the new student completes the task, make sure to show your gratitude. Focus your praise on how the student has made a contribution to the community. You might say, "Thank goodness you're here. We need someone like you in our class to help hold the door for us." Or, "It's so great that you're tall. We needed someone to reach that cabinet." It might seem simple, but by asking a new student to do something helpful, you will transform a child from someone waiting to see if they are accepted by a new group into a contributing member of a classroom community. Students, especially those who have moved a lot, want to feel that they are needed and genuinely welcomed into a classroom community, not just assigned to a class. I saw this happen firsthand on Benji's first day of school. He was simply dropped off at the front of the building. No one walked him into the office or told him where to go. A helpful student asked him if he was lost and showed him to our classroom. Entering a new school in the middle of the year must have been difficult for him. Rules and relationships had already been established. I am sure it made walking into a new school even more challenging that there was no one there to shepherd him in. If it had been me, I would have felt intimidated and certainly not welcomed. So I followed my simple steps. I made it very clear to Benji that he was welcome and that our class was excited to have a new student. I got him set up in a seat right away and gave him a manageable task to decorate his own name tag. Once this was underway, I praised him. "Those are great colors. How did you choose them?" I asked. Benji told me they were the colors of his favorite football team. Then I asked him if he would use his artistic abilities to make a sign for our classroom door with our room number. He gladly obliged and started decorating a big Room 207 sign. Other students chimed in with compliments on his art skills as I sent him out into the hall with a few new friends to hang up the sign. Within 15 minutes, Benji transformed a lost little boy into a contributing member of the community who had already begun to form relationships with his classmates. When another new student, Sigrid, joined entered our classroom, I again focused on building the relationship. When she arrived at our door, she was hiding behind her mother, who had clearly prepared for this day. She had slicked her daughter's shiny auburn hair into 2 perfect pigtails and dressed her in a bright outfit. Sigrid looked beyond me to the seeming chaos of students setting up chairs and turning in homework. I saw her trying to hold back tears, which ultimately started trickling down her face. She began sobbing. What do you do when a child you just met is crying uncontrollably? I got down on Sigrid's level, looked her right in the eye, and said, "I know this is hard." I quickly told her I had been the new kid in elementary school 4 times, and each time I worried about making friends. I let her know our class was a wonderful class. We had nice kids, and we had awesome books to read. I told her our class was lucky to have her, that we needed her there. Then I showed her to the water fountain and told her we had a seat waiting for her when she was ready. Later in the year, the students wrote a paragraph explaining a time when they felt sad. Part of Sigrid's paragraph read,
I was sad on my first day of school, but then Miss Schwartz told me that she was the new kid once, and it made me feel better, so I stopped crying. Children need comfort and reassurance. They also need touchstones in a strange environment, but most of all, they need a teacher willing to build a relationship with them from the very beginning. Number 2, welcome kits. A few months into my first year of teaching, our school secretary stopped me on the way into school. She told me a new student, Marana, would join our class that day. She also told me this new student used a wheelchair. This was the first time I had ever been assigned a new student. I frantically ran up to my room to arrange the tables in my classroom so Marana could access our room. I had to track down our custodian to see if he could raise a table so her wheelchair could fit underneath it. All of a sudden, the bell rang. Nothing was ready, and I was flustered. Looking back, I think of how Marana must have felt as she entered my classroom. I was concerned about the logistics of adding a new student, but she was concerned about feeling welcome. As the year went on, I was able to build a meaningful relationship with her, but I'm sure the transition could have gone more smoothly. Ever since then, I've made it a point to have the essentials ready for a new student in a welcome package. New students experience so much trepidation about their first day. They are anxious about being singled out and worried about making a connection with their peers and teachers. The last thing they need is an overwhelmed, unprepared teacher. Generally, I expect about 5 new students to enter my classroom at some point in the year, so I create welcome kits. It does not take much extra time or effort because I do this as I am setting up my classroom at the beginning of the year. As I prepare for the first day of school, I set aside extra materials for potential new students. I fill 5 cardboard magazine boxes. Each contains a homework folder, writing notebook, and a nameplate for the desk. I also include copies of welcome letters from back to school nights and important handouts. For older students, a teacher might include a class syllabus, a binder, and contact information. As a school, we are also able to give each student who enters in the middle of the year a pencil bag with a basic school supplies such as pencils, markers, and glue sticks donated from UB, a philanthropy-focused school supply company. It is a very practical and tangible way to make new students feel welcome and cared about. Molly Couture, the office manager at the Denver School of Science and Technology, makes the welcome kit a bit further. Our school has a strong onboarding process for new students at the beginning of the school year, but I realized that some students were falling through the cracks when they transferred to our school in the middle of the school year. One year, on the very last day of school, a student told me shyly that no one had ever assigned him a locker. I knew we needed to get systematic so that nothing gets skipped. Our office created a welcome passport for students registering in the middle of the year. Students now go through a comprehensive checklist that makes sure all their administrative needs are met. This also serves to teach new students about the culture of our school and introduce them to the teachers and staff members that can support them when needed. For me, it is important to ensure our school is prepared to make new students feel welcomed right away. I also see an opportunity to get our current students and families involved in the creation of welcome kits. A student council could be put in charge of creating them. As students, they might have a better idea of what items would be helpful to include. Perhaps giving a new student an extra school shirt or free tickets to school dances or sports events would encourage them to join in. This idea could even be expanded to include the whole family. Welcome kits can be adapted to meet the needs of local communities. Imagine giving a new family a backpack full of books or a packet of coupons to local restaurants. One school might include winter hats and gloves. Another might include coins for the local laundromat or subway cards. Having the school community give thought to the needs of students who will inevitably enter their school in the middle of the year helps create a welcoming culture. Welcome kits have helped me do just that. Since I have already put thought into how I am going to welcome a new student, even when I am given no warning, these pre-made welcome kits make students feel they already have a place in this community. I feel prepared to welcome a student at any time. Number 3, making hellos and farewells official. When a student joins my class in the middle of the year, it is often due to a major change in their life. A few words of encouragement from their teacher can make a student feel valued. Sending home a simple handwritten note with a new student can be powerful. A letter might look like this. Hello, Joanna. I just wanted to tell you how excited I am that you are in our class. Thanks for telling me about your pet cat. Did you know our class is going to a baseball game next month? Do you like baseball? See you tomorrow, Miss Schwartz. P.S. Write me back. You can take the idea of a welcoming letter to the next level by having your whole class sign it. A tangible note tells a new student that their teacher and class are happy to meet them and share community together can be a powerful way to build a relationship. These official notes can be especially meaningful to students of diverse cultures. When I was studying in China as a member of the Fulbright Hays group, I noticed several times how meaningful official documents were to Chinese students. Letters and awards were proudly displayed in homes and schools. One Chinese professor stopped his lecture to pull out an official thank you note he had received and passed it around. This experience made me realize how to some people, officialness is a prized gesture. So if sending home an official letter helps a family feel welcome and valued, I'm all for it. Once, I even created an official welcome award. At our school, we have 2 award ceremonies at the end of each semester. Teachers give out various certificates like art awards and honor roll awards. That year, we were faced with a problem. 2 students enrolled in our school a few days before the ceremony. Instead of having them sit idle and watch as their peers were cheered for while they received certificates, we whipped up 2 official welcome awards. The new students beamed as their names were called. Both students were able to take home an official award for their family to display on their refrigerator. It was such a success that our school is working on getting welcome awards to all new students. Schools might also consider hosting a welcome lunch each month to extend an official welcome. Teachers and schools need to have plans in place to support students when they enter our communities, but we also need to give consideration to when students must go. When a student leaves a classroom community, often the teacher's immediate response is to remove all their things, take their names off the wall, and make space for the next student. I urge teachers not to do this. Don't erase students from your classroom community's collective memory. Instead, leave their name tags and work on the wall when possible. When students in my class asked why I still had Ronaldo's name tag up, I said, because I miss him. And I like remembering all the fun times we had together in class. I want us all to remember him. It sends a message to the students who stay that everyone is a valuable member of the community. When a student has to leave our class, I like to send them off with a stack of letters from the class. If our class knows in advance that a student is moving, I send a blank sheet of notebook paper home with simple instructions. Write a letter saying goodbye to Ronaldo. The next day, I always get back a stack of letters full of kind words and encouragement. Students in my classroom are missed, even when they move without warning. Like when one of my students, Jenilyn, who suddenly left, she was an enthusiastic learner, once announcing to me, Miss Schwartz, I'm going to remind you every day that I'm going to college. After Jenilyn had not shown up for school for several days, our school secretary found out she had just registered to attend another school in a different city. Just like it must have been for Jenilyn, the sudden move was difficult for the students in our class. They missed their friend and didn't even have a chance to say goodbye. To respond to this situation, I remembered advice from a fellow teacher, Susanna Moning. She told me that whenever a student moved away, her class wrote goodbye letters, even when the move was unexpected and the student had already left. Whenever she could, Susanna delivered the letters to the student's new school or home. If she couldn't locate where the student had moved, she kept the letters waiting in a shoebox in the classroom just in case he or she ever returned. Kids need closure when relationships end. It is a teacher's job to take care of the community, she told me. I used this strategy as a way for our classroom community to say goodbye to Jenna Lynn. The day we found out she had transferred schools, we all took a few minutes at the beginning of class and wrote her letters. I was touched to read how much kindness and empathy my students displayed in their writing. I quickly compiled them, and our school secretary sent them to Jenna Lynn's new school along with her academic records. This gave the class a sense of closure and reassured students that if they ever moved away, they would be missed. I like to think of Jenna Lynn sitting in her new classroom miles away, suddenly receiving a big stack of letters and reading the warm wishes and messages of encouragement from her friends. It's nice to think that even though she was no longer with our class, she still felt cared about. And last, number 4, transition mementos. Another way to show a child that they will be missed is to give them a transition memento. When a child is dealing with something out of their control, like moving and switching schools, sometimes it helps to give them something they can actually hold on to. Our classroom started a tradition to help students when they were leaving our classroom in the middle of the year. When Ronaldo left, we gave him a shark's tooth necklace so that he could be strong like a shark. I've seen other teachers print out a photograph of the class for the classmates to sign. There are no rules on what will make a good transition memento. It just needs to be meaningful to the class and student who is transitioning. You could give the student a rock from the playground or press some leaves from a tree. A favorite book or stuffed animal will work as well. With older students, creating a transition memento could be as simple as taking a class picture. Whatever you choose as a transition memento, the departing student will feel cared about and appreciated. Students who leave your community will have something to hold in their hands as a reminder that there are people who care about them and miss them. This is yet another way to provide a sense of closure for the rest of your students, because as their friend leaves, a piece of their classroom community will be carried away with them. When a student comes or goes in our classrooms, we must remember that the individual student is not the only one in transition. As a new student arrives, we must model and expect welcoming behavior from the other members of the classroom. It is equally important to consider how to make the class feel whole when a friend and classmate has to leave. If national trends continue, more and more students will switch schools, and the effects are real. As teachers, we must investigate and understand the underlying causes of student mobility, both nationally and in our communities. Issues like housing security and job security, though political in nature, play themselves out in our classroom every day. They affect our students' ability to stay in our schools and learn. Educators can be the ones who elevate our students' stories and advocate for their needs. Teachers need to deliberately prepare for the effects of student mobility in their classrooms. Each child who enters or leaves your classroom community has a story. It's up to you. It's up to us to support our students and ensure that transitioning into or out of our classrooms is a positive experience. As teachers, we can't always control when and why a student transitions to or from our school, but we can focus on what we do control, how we handle each situation. By having strategies ready, we can make students feel welcome and included when they arrive, as well as valued and missed if they must leave.